I'm sure. No, he's crushing it. Bob knows.
It's better to turn the TV on first, isn't it?
Oh,
That's
either
what I
way,
always do.
either way.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, he won't, yeah.
Are you coming in here to babysit me?
Oh, I thought I'd help and I have to check on Evie and have my closing, so I'm kind of running back and forth.
Oh my God. Already?
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. I
Thank
want to hear that bell chime.
Ching. Just kidding.
Mhm. Mhm. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I don't want to do that. Mm-mm. What is going, there it is, boom, that one, right? That one. And then over here. Same system as in speakers.
You'll just mute it if you want it muted.
So that's what I Mute myself. I did. Unmute. Can you guys hear me on Zoom?
Yeah, we can hear
Are you happy about that?
you. Yeah.
Well, we'll get started in like 2 minutes because everybody seems to show up at 5 after. But thanks for joining, Lee and Casey. And we do have Tom here from Housemaster, which he's been doing this now. This is 3rd month in a row.
Yeah.
I think. So trying to get him here. He's an inspector and he's somebody I've used for quite some time, and you guys can ask questions about anything. We're not going to just leave it specifically to what I have kind of lined up, but feel free to answer or ask any questions you may have if you've had any inspections or if you're showing houses and something you saw. If you want to let me know an address, we can pull up an address on MLS and take a look at it online and just see what we have. Let's see. All right. Oh, good. Got another one. How come my big head shows up on the screen up there? My big head.
Whoever's talking.
I get tired of looking at myself. I do that enough at home in the mirror.
Better.
Do that baby time and send it right quick.
Abby, what's up, Abby? What's up?
So,
He loves when people pay attention to her.
Yes, she does. Liz, I'm not sure if you heard when I was talking just a minute or two ago. We have Tom Kelsey from Housemaster for a 3rd time in a row with us for this class. And if you have any questions that you want to ask specifically about any homes that you've looked at or anything maybe you have under contract or whatever. I think
Yes,
you've been here before when he's been here, so.
I have, but I didn't have specific questions and now I do. So I'm glad to join today. Thanks for having me.
Oh, now we're gonna get tested.
that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, let's start off with those questions right now. And do you want me to bring up anything on MLS?
Actually, yes, that would be amazing. I have the address, but let me see if I can pull up the MLS number real quick.
Yeah,
Is it still up? No.
even if you just give me the street name.
Sure. It is 506 Quieto, Quieto. I'm getting used to pronouncing it that way. I kept saying
Valla Verde.
yes.
Do you know where this is, Tom? It's down around Alameda
Mhm.
and just off Tejon.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is it? Something you have under contract, something you showed?
Something I showed and we're putting an offer in. So I just put together the offer and contract. We're just deciding, she's reviewing it on her end just to make sure that she feels good and comfortable with the neighborhood and all that. But as far as next steps, this would be my first official transaction. So I just want to make sure that I would be taking care of everything as far as inspection goes. Anything that Tom is your name? I'm so sorry, right?
Yes.
So it's built in 1950, right?
Yes.
And this area, we're just gonna expand it just so we can kind of see the surrounding areas. Doesn't tend to be any, because we're gonna talk about some soils, areas that can be hot with soils as far as expansive soils or bentonite. You may have heard that term.
Yes.
The other thing is you doesn't look like you have anything to worry about as far as a flood zone, but you can always check on the listings and hit the flood map and it'll show you if there are any issues, which this does not have, okay?
Is it which color zoning? I should be able to just see that, but thank you.
Down
Which
below.
one is it
Yeah.
red concerning?
It's purple. It's this one here. This is the bad color.
Oh, that makes sense. Yes. Thank you, though. That's been really beneficial to show my clients in the process too. They will
Oh.
always like,
Absolutely, and I don't know if you were on the other day on Coffee Talk, because I was talking with David in Altitude last week. And if you're close, if you're selling a property close to a flood zone, but not in it, you can still get flood insurance, and it's dramatically less. It's about a quarter to a fifth the price, just to make sure, because I've shown some places where the flood zone was within, 100 feet or less. And we're talking about fairly deep ravines where water can build up, and it could obviously, if you got a big, once in a 500-year type flood, it could access the property. So,
wow.
okay, so what do you want to talk about here, Tom, on this house? Anything, probably asbestos?
Yeah, so just
potential?
looking at 1950, we want to make sure that our client is aware, because it's not part of a home inspection, to talk about lead paint.
Mhm.
And a house of this era absolutely has lead paint on it.
We have talked about that multiple times with this client. I've told her no licking any walls. So she's she's comfortable with it.
And there was walls moved here, obviously, to do the kitchen.
Yeah. Very much. And then the picture that you have open there does have popcorn ceilings too. So I've referenced that. The way that, and maybe this is something that you can make sure I'm expressing this the right way, but so I say that if it has popcorn ceilings, it's no problem as long as you're not disturbing it. So if you were to decide that you wanted to change the ceiling, that's when you really want to make sure you're hiring someone and not doing it yourself, because it's when it's disturbed that you could breathe it in. She did ask specifically for this one if you're just to, install a hook in the ceiling, if that's concerning. And I said that it's okay to just wear a mask. How would you approach that?
I'll let you do that one.
It's a great question.
It is a good question.
So I would say at a minimum, you want to wear a mask, but you probably want to wet the area first
Mhm.
to prevent dust and
Yeah.
dust spread.
What you're trying to do with asbestos is encapsulate it and keep it from turning into powder, basically.
Right.
So what happens, like when there's asbestos on the siding, a lot of people will cut into it, not thinking about it, and it creates quite a bit of dust. And if you inhale that, it's in your lungs pretty
Right.
much right away. So that's one thing you want to be aware of. If you're going to scrape the ceiling to retexture it, then absolutely you need to hire somebody for mitigation of it.
Perfect. Is there a
If it's positive.
okay. Yep. And then is there a general idea on estimate of cost that would take if you were to scrape and retexture?
Somebody that does it correctly. Yeah,
So you're probably looking at $300 to $500 just to test.
for the test.
Yeah.
That's for the test only, and then to actually go back and okay, that makes sense.
You're gonna get a plethora of bids. You're gonna get people who don't know what they're doing. It'll say, I'll do it for $500, and you're gonna get people who know what they're doing and say, for the living room, we're gonna charge you $4,000.
Yeah.
It's not an easy job to do correctly.
And it's better. I mean, it's definitely, especially having sensitive lungs and asthma and all that. I'd rather err on the side of caution. So that's good to know.
It's got a newer panel.
Got a newer panel, a newer looking roof.
Mhm.
It looks pretty flat around
Yes.
here.
And that's common.
Yeah.
In that age of house, they didn't do much with excavating and getting some slope away from the house. So when you're showing older homes, 95% of the time, it's going to be a very flat lot, and you're going to notice that there could be penetration into the foundation or the basement, whatever there happens to be. The reason I knew this was a newer panel is because the mast is also taller. Okay, that's the mast that's on the rooftop.
Okay.
Okay, plus the box is bigger than what they used to be back then. They used to be pretty small, like, I don't know, 14 by 8, 10, something
Yeah,
like that.
small.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The other thing that I would just say here is, just when I saw the 1950, one of the first things I thought about is aluminum wiring.
Mhm.
Oh, I don't know anything about aluminum wiring.
What?
Some things, tell me more though.
So single strand aluminum wire, which was put in the 50s, 60s into the mid 70s. The single strand has a tendency to expand and contract when the power is turned on and off. And so over a matter of years, that expansion contraction will make the connection points loose. And when those get loose, they can then spark. And when they spark, they can cause a fire. So if you have aluminum wiring, Bob's pulling up the purple connectors here. They need to either be treated for aluminum wiring, or the wiring needs to be replaced.
Right.
And so that's something your inspector should be looking at and looking for, particularly in a house of this vintage.
But what happens is when the aluminum gets hot, it expands, and then when it cools off, it contracts. And so what it can do is cause a problem where when electricity goes in there, it can arc, and guess what that can do? It'll start a fire.
Yes, I have sadly experience with that in my property management career, and it was
There you go.
terrible.
So you knew, and there's purple wire connectors. There's another one that I can't think of, that my cousin, who's an electrician, he's done a few houses for me where I asked the seller, I said, are you aware? And they said, yes, we have aluminum wiring. Do I need to replace the panel? I said, well, you can replace the panel and all the wiring, or you can get these. Yeah, and I can't think of the name of it, but they're like $24 per piece. So like a house I did over in Applewood, it was $2,500 because you have to do all the wire connections and the plugs and then the switches. But it's still cheaper than a whole new panel and running new wire.
Okay, makes
And
sense.
knowing it up front and being able to advertise the listing that it had all been done made it much easier than getting into halfway into inspection. And somebody comes along and says, hey, you got a problem here.
Right,
Well, we knew it, so we took care of it ahead of time.
makes
Okay.
sense. Okay, thank you. That's extremely beneficial.
Good. What else would you think about for a 1950s?
Yeah, so I'm gonna expect the furnace to be in the crawl space in this house.
Yes, there is a crawl space that's accessible from the outdoors, from what I.
Outside? Mhm. Yeah,
And that's generally not a problem. We just want to make sure that that furnace has been
it's right here.
cleaned and easily,
think.
it's easily accessible.
That is not the best sealant for a crawl space.
Yeah,
Obviously, this is plywood and it's wet and it's warped. So you probably want to make sure when the inspector goes down that you can say, hey, how does it look down there? Do they have plastic on the dirt? And is there venting down there to help preclude moisture from building up? Right, Tom?
Yeah, so I would just make sure when you're scheduling the inspection that you're making it clear to them that you're expecting this to be opened and readily accessible.
Yes, this,
Right.
which it probably is. It looks like it's open anyway.
when,
Yeah. Sometimes people will lock them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll, I don't know. There's all kinds of crazy reasons why you can't get into these, but
Okay.
I've gone to inspections and there's been snow on the ground and I couldn't find it.
You couldn't find it, right?
You know,
oh,
just
Uh-huh.
stuff,
And
stuff like that comes up.
Here's another thing that bothers me about this. You got a downspout right here. Where's the water gonna try to go
Oh.
back?
right into the crawl space, yeah.
Thank you very much, right? That should be up here.
Yes, definitely. Okay, yeah, when we went to see it, this was right, we went on Sunday, so it was all covered in snow. We could see that was there, but we definitely couldn't get into it.
Right. And those are just little things I always look at and write a note to myself so that if we are going to maybe write an offer, I can definitely let somebody, like if Tom's going to be doing the inspection, which you would be, probably, I would point
Would,
out, to them, hey, I have a concern back here that this downspout is right by the entrance to the crawl space.
yes,
And, you know, is it causing an issue?
right, okay, that makes sense.
With these flat lots in these older homes, you really have to be quite aware about drainage because they just do not have hardly any drainage away from the house. And in fact, a lot of them have drainage towards the house because for I'll say for 50 years or 70 years, they've been having water collect by the foundation and it sinks. And now you have a negative grade towards the foundation. And especially on the west side and the north side of the house. Because that's where most of our storms come in from with snow.
Oh, I was thinking of sun.
Rain can penetrate all over because it tends to, especially if you get a heavy downpour, it can saturate, you know, the ground pretty much all the way around because it comes more or less straight down. But snow tends to be on the north side and the west sides. And then it can also loop around the house if the winds create and come around the eaves of the back of the house and blow in back towards the house like this one, possibly.
Right,
Okay.
okay, that makes sense. Thank you, that's extremely helpful.
So another thing we're gonna look for, just based on the age, is galvanized water piping.
Mhm.
Ooh,
Yeah, and you won't be able to probably see it unless you go in the crawl space.
Yeah, in the crawl space, we'll be able to tell, but
And I doubt if you went down there.
no, we did not, we're not, we're adventurous, we're willing to go into some questionable spaces, but this one was a big no.
And that brings up a point, because like if you're showing in North Glen, and especially the ones over off of Pecos, where Promac built the homes off of Pecos in about 75th.
Yes.
They have basements, and then a lot of times you can go in the basement and you can see the water pipes, and if they happen to be an old lead type pipe, you can tell. But once in a while, people will paint the pipe so that you can't tell if it's copper or what it is. You can kind
Ooh,
of
that-
tell the diameter of it, but yeah, you can't tell 100%. So they probably don't want you scraping the pipe to find out if it's lead or
yeah,
copper.
I mean, if
But-
there's a place that can scrape it and people can't see.
Yeah.
On the backside, we'll try to.
Yeah,
do
exactly.
so, but sometimes it's, what's worse is when they encapsulate it so that it looks like it's hidden there with this little tiny wall hatch that's like 4x4. And you can't even get your hand in there to
Right.
scrape it.
Mhm.
Nervous.
So the other thing I would be curious about in this house is the attic space. Sometimes we'll find these old attic spaces, this is a very low slope roof. And so there's not gonna be a lot of room in there. And on top of that, if people came in, they put too much, well, that's actually not too bad.
That's not bad. That's a
Yeah.
412, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, that'll be fine to look into. But in this age of house, we want to look for asbestos up there as well. Especially if there's a newer style of insulation on top.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And a lot of times people don't upgrade the insulation.
Yeah, they just go over the top.
They just go over the top, or they don't do anything. And they wonder why their heat bills for a little house like this is $300.
Right, right.
Because they haven't. Just to give you an example, I have a house right now under contract out in Montbello area. I actually sold it to my client. It was a foreclosure that my investor bought. He fixed it up. My buyer bought it. And since then, Joey has greatly improved the insulation in the attic. And he also added solar and he added triple pane windows to this little 1,450 square foot house.
Oh, I bet that helped the heat bill so much.
Most months, he has no electric bill. He pays $74 a month for the solar. And he just sent me his bill yesterday. It is so good that they didn't even, he got a credit even towards his gas. Because
Wow.
the house is that efficient. So talking to people and your clients and building that relationship of saying, hey, when you get in, you know, this is probably not going to have insulation that is to current standards, but the sellers don't really need to bring it to current standards, but you can bring it up in an inspection and say, hey, we would like $1,000 credit towards closing costs because we want to upgrade the insulation, and we just want to make sure, and we don't have a lot of extra money or whatever. You can always, always bring things like that up to your buyer so that they understand that you know what you're doing, and trying to help them to make sure that they don't get into a money pit.
Yes, that's the worst that I would be putting myself or my client into, and just making sure that this is a substantial purchase. So, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
And they've got newer windows on the property. So,
Yep.
you know, it looks like it's a nice little home, and it doesn't look like it's a fix and flip.
No, there's some opportunities for little upgrades here and there, but overall she would be using this as to live in for now, and then potentially for some little bit of upgrades and investment for the future. So, okay. Anything else that concerns you? Or I don't want to take up the full time. If anyone else has questions, feel free.
We're fine. This is what it's about. I want you guys to understand stuff before you're going out to show properties, and this is how you learn. One thing that we talked about yesterday, Monday, in Coffee Talk too, is how do you look up and see if a house has been a foreclosure, and then these people flipping it. So you can go to the tax and find out where they've sold in the last, typically the last 20-ish years or so, and just see if you see, you know, deed in lieu or any kind of thing that initiates the fact that it was a trustee's deed or public trustee purchased it, and just check the previous owners. And then that way you know ahead of time that you don't have to worry about it if it was a flip. Because what do a lot of flippers do? They say, we're not going to fill out a seller's property disclosure because we don't know anything about the house, but we just spent $100,000 fixing it up, but we don't know anything.
Exactly.
So that's what I really worry about with you guys and anybody selling a house that's been flipped, because a lot of flippers are dishonest about what they have done and not done. Okay.
Thank you. This really helped.
Yeah, go get them, Liz.
Go get them.
Thank you. And then last question for you, Tom. So if and when I'm to reach out to you to do the inspection for this one, what is expectations as far as scheduling? Is it usually a couple days? How can I, as far as making sure that I can be on target?
We can do in the week for the week for sure. So we've got at least 3 spots left this week.
Okay.
Nice. Okay, well, I'm just waiting for the go-ahead from my client to put in the offer. It's all set and ready to go and reviewed and everything to put in today. So hopefully you'll be hearing from me shortly.
All right.
Can I give you one other little thing that in a competitive market, which right now it's not as bad with, you know, a lot of buyers. But one thing I do is I call up my inspectors, and by then my buyer has decided what inspector they'd like to use. And I call up the inspector and say, are you available Wednesday at all? Yes, I am at 3 o'clock. I write into my offer, the inspection is, should this offer be accepted, the inspection is scheduled with Tom Kelsey of Housemaster at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, blah, blah, blah. Agent will be present and lock all doors prior to leaving. And that makes them get a little bit of a more fuzzy, good feeling that I know what I'm doing. And we've already got the inspection set up, and we're not running around like chickens with our head cut off at the last second.
Yes.
And then if the buyer's or the seller's agent wants to check it out, they can check it out too. They can call Tom and say, hey, how many inspections have you done in the last year? Oh, 1. At least 1. No, but it helps set that standard that makes people a little more comfortable with accepting an offer, that you've already got those things taken care of.
And you include that in the offer details, you write that up.
I put it in additional provisions. Now, I have been reprimanded by Mr. Damien that is not really the correct way to do it, but I find it very beneficial. So, and all I'm doing is giving them information. I'm not trying to do anything other than that, which makes us look maybe better than the next offer. Not that
Yeah.
you're gonna have 2 offers or 3 offers against you, but hey, if you have that ability to do it, why not?
Absolutely. And yes, I would love to be present. If anything, I want to learn and be there and make sure everything's secured. So
You should be
awesome.
present at every inspection. And if
Yeah.
you can't, ask if somebody can, and you do not ever, even if it's Tom, which I know and trust, I don't ever call up Tom and say, Tom, I won't be there, here's the lockbox.
Oh
If
God, no.
you can't be there and somebody cannot be there, you get permission from the listing agent, say, hey, listen, something's come up, I cannot make it. My inspector who I've used will be there. Is it possible for him to have the lockbox to gain access? Okay, I've had many people calling my listings. The inspector calls us and says, we're gonna do the inspection Friday at 2. Can I get the lockbox? No, you can't. Okay,
No.
well, why not? We do this all the time. I said, well, you're not going to do it on this listing because I don't allow inspectors to just walk into the house. I don't know who they are, right?
Exactly.
So just be careful about things. And again,
Thank
it's apart. So,
you.
any other questions?
That covers it for this one. I have to jump off. I have a call scheduled at 10:30, but this is so beneficial to me. Thank you so much for being willing to run through my questions and pulling up the property specifically. Both. Thank you both, Bob and Tom.
All right, bye-bye. Good luck.
Talk soon. Thanks so much.
So here's something else, Casey and Lee, I have. Here's 15 different items to look for at inspections, things that tend to fail at a home inspection. We just talked about one of these right here, ground sloping or draining towards the house. This is a very common thing in the older homes. I'd say what, up to the 70s? 80s?
Well, I would say 80% of all inspections that we write have
something.
comment.
Mhm.
I was just talking about a 1990s house I did yesterday,
Okay,
and it has slope issues because they put a flower bed in it up next to the house.
yeah, that's,
Right.
you see that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, flower beds up next to the house, shrubs right next to the house, even a big tree right next to the house. Those can be issues. Okay, not only with drainage, but other things. I think they call it a drip line. When you have a great big tree that hangs over the roof of the house, structural engineer has told me, you look at that tree and where is 50% of that water going to drip down to? It's kind of the drip line. And you can look at the moisture level that when snow gathers on that tree and then comes down, it's going to drain right next to the foundation, a lot of it. So, and then the roots are right next to the foundation. So those can all lead to some issues. So looking at ground and how it slopes is very important. Problems with foundation. I don't have any pictures here. I don't know if you guys have seen the white colored powder if you've been in a basement of a house where there's maybe right at the floor and the wall meet together and there's a white powdery substance. That's efflorescence. And that's basically caused by moisture breaking down the minerals in the concrete and causing this little white powdery dust to occur. Doesn't mean that you have structural issues, but it does mean that there is some moisture penetrating, and probably you'll find that out in that area outside that maybe the drainage isn't the best, or maybe a downspout exits right there. Or once in a while you'll find a water spigot and maybe they had a problem with a water spigot breaking and flooding that area, right? I mean, I'm sure you've seen that in your career.
Absolutely.
Yep. That leads to the next one, issues with plumbing and pipes. You know, if a seller's selling their house, they're supposed to let us know if they've had leaky faucets or broken pipes or whatever. But a lot of times they don't tell you anything. One that I see a fair amount of is water heaters when they broke, and you can see that it just kind of flooded the area. Right.
Yeah. We always want to look for mold on the wall behind us.
Right. And then you brought up the point that yesterday you saw polybutylene pipe, which I'll let Tom explain what polybutylene pipe is.
So polybutylene was it's generally gray in color, plastic water pipe. And the way I typically see these here is they would come into the house to the main with copper line, and then it would branch off in this gray. And what makes polybutylene unique is it had these brass or maybe even aluminum collars that they crimped everywhere they went, and those collars would leak, and it leaked so much there were lawsuits, and it was only put in the early 90s, and they realized after just a few years there's a that's it.
That's it.
When we see that stuff, we're calling it out. And so, as we mentioned with Liz earlier, like when somebody calls me and I ask for a copy of the listing, you know, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing early 90s, and my brain goes, okay, like we want to make sure we're looking right, because sometimes in a finished basement, the only place we see these pipes are where they come through the back of the cabinet under the kitchen sink or maybe in the bathroom.
Right.
So we have very limited space to find this stuff. But by knowing what we're looking for in a specific era of house, it makes it a lot easier for us to find it.
Right. Yeah, it's really a telltale sign is when you see the metal on there, it's like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
got a problem.
In PEX now has some, but they're more of a grayish metal. So it really comes down to like one thing that's unique about polybutylene is it doesn't say polybutylene anywhere on it. So experiences
PB.
Yeah, so it'll have PB on there sometimes, but it's not always marked.
Yeah.
So
Right.
if it's PEX, generally we see that in the blue, white, and red colors, never in gray.
And
So.
PEX is in, I don't know if any of you, Casey or Lee or Elena, have been in a new home, new built, but you're seeing PEX a lot.
Yeah, the cross poly linked.
Let me try to pull it up.
Yeah.
PEX plumbing. There you go.
Yeah, so this stuff, PEX, you see it everywhere in new builds, in a lot of renovations. And so, you know, this is the joy we have is figuring out is something PEX or is it polybutylene. And again, the big key for me is the age of the house.
The age of the house. Okay. This is like the manifold where you have the hot and cold water coming in. The nice thing about this is this tells you where the water's going to. They're labeled well. And I can't remember, is there a way to turn them off just individually there or just at the faucet itself?
I actually don't know.
I'm not sure.
I've seen a lot of those manifolds and I've never really thought about it.
Okay. So let's go to the next item, leaks. Well, we're supposed to know about leaks if they've had a problem in the house, but we don't always. And then there's going to be the telltale sign of maybe some mold, right? Or moisture,
Yeah,
at least.
so let's talk about leaks for just a second. You always want to keep in mind that a home inspection is a visual inspection. And so our biggest enemy is when somebody has a moldy or leaked on wall that they've just repainted. There's nothing we can do about that.
No, there's
once
not.
we see something, think it might be our standard of practice is to always check it with a moisture meter and then with a thermal camera to be able to double check. So we have two ways of telling if there's actual water present in the material. During an inspection, especially like this inspection that Liz was just talking about, it's awfully helpful if you can help your inspector a little bit.
Yes.
So when I go down in that crawl space, one of the things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask the agent to turn some water on and flush some toilets, because I'm gonna be able to see all the piping down underneath. And the only way I can find a leak is if the water is actually running. But I never wanna leave water running anywhere in the house, because I don't wanna cause a leak. So if you're there and present, it's always great to, if you can give us a little hand with some stuff like that.
I had a house I was helping my structural engineer with one time. And he crawled under the floor. And I said, you want me to tie a rope to you so I can pull you out in case you get stuck? I mean to tell you, it was about that deep, and he crawled in there to look at the structure for me. And he said, whoa, well, here's a snake. Oh, here's a spider too. Yeah, you're gonna find weird stuff.
Animals you have.
Yes.
Spaces.
Yep. Mold, we just kind of talked about. Termite damage.
So just one comment on
Let's
mold.
do.
So your home inspector should never tell you that you found mold. That you may have found a mold-like substance or something that looks like mold. The only way, just like lead paint, just like asbestos. It's not those things until it's been tested.
Right. Could be, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is.
Right.
And I don't know if you guys know how they test for mold, but essentially what they do is they get a
Aerosol.
Yeah, and I can't remember what they call the people who do the actual testing. It's an odd name, but they measure the air in the house and they measure the air outside. And if the air in the house has less mold than outside, they're not worried about it. But if it has a higher reading than the exterior, now they're concerned, and then they're going to be looking for issues with why is the mold in their house elevated over and above outside. So, and it's not a cheap thing, but it's not, if you have suspect of it, and respiratory issues, if you go into a house and you're showing it and maybe the people are on oxygen or, you just don't know, you're trying to look for some telltale signs of maybe, is there any issues? A lot of times you don't see them, and the inspector might see things that you're not going to see, and that's why you want to do an inspection. And that's why I'm glad we're in this kind of market right now where people don't have to write an offer as they walk out the front door. You can actually take your time and have an inspection. I would highly recommend never, ever, ever selling a house without getting an inspection. I can tell you truthfully, honestly, that in 30+ years of doing this, I've maybe had 4 or 5 buyers say, we're not worried. I even pay for closing. I even pay for inspector to come out to do new builds and do a full inspection. And I pay for my client so that they have that peace of mind. It's a small price to pay. They're like ecstatic about it. I've not had one who wasn't excited that I'm paying for their inspection. I didn't think we had to have an inspection. Well, you don't have to, but why not? Because we always find something. I've never not found anything, and I've told this story before. In 3 homes, all built by the same builder with the first part of their name as Rich, none of the house's attics in areas had any insulation. And when you're doing a walkthrough with the builder, nobody gets up in the attic and looks around. Guess what? This man does. And he's going to find things. He found a problem with the sewer line in one of them. Found a piece of wood, I think it was, or something.
Somebody shoved down.
And the builder took care of it. It wasn't that they were trying to hide it, but they didn't know. Okay. So
just a last comment on mold. We have more mold. I've done more air sampling tests in the last 4 months, so I guess 6 months now than I've ever done.
there you go.
And just as an example, yesterday I don't know, maybe it was last week, we had a basement egress window and I could see kind of dirt on the sill. And when I put my flashlight on it, I could kind of see where it looked like maybe water had run down the wall below it. So, we were talking about that, and the buyers came and they're like, oh, well, we're very sensitive. And so they were interested in having a mold test, and that house came up positive for mold.
There you go.
So they're having that remediated, and 9 times out of 10 people would have said, oh, that was just, 1 week from rainy season.
And a hot, yeah, we had a very rainy spring. And you want to be aware of those things because that can perpetuate problems, all right? So, termite? See much in the way of termites?
I've seen 1 wood destroying insect in Colorado.
Well, I've seen about 20.
Yeah,
So be aware that there can be. Now, if people say, well, do you have termite inspections here? Not typically, but you can hire a company to come out. I did find last year in Colorado Springs, I was selling a house. I opened the window, wood window, and right in the corner there was all these termites. I said, I think these are termites. I took a picture, I sent it, looked at it. Yep, it was termites. So we ended up asking for the seller to verify that there were no other termite infestation and to buy a 1-year plan to protect the buyer, which was a veteran. So don't think that there aren't termites. And there's one area in particular in Arvada, which is north of 80th, west of Sheridan, and it's over by Lake Arbor. In the Lake Arbor homes in that area, there have been a fair amount of houses with termites in that area. What's common there? You have a lake, and termites like moisture. The other place you'll see them is up in the foothills at times. And if people have any kind of wood stacked next to the house, check it, because a lot of times there's termites in that wood. And if there's termites in the wood, they're trying to get into the house somewhere, right? So up in the foothills, you always want to see people stack their firewood away from the house. You don't want it leaning up next to the house. That's not a good place for it, right? And so just be aware, you can have termites. It's just, fortunately, we don't typically have termites, which is good, right? I agree. Rotting wood. You ever seen rotting wood in the house?
all over the place.
Yeah, we have a dry climate compared to a lot of places, and we still have problems with rotting wood. You'll find it everywhere.
Yeah.
Decks are notorious for it.
Decks, windows, window framing. Anywhere where there's a lot of water.
Mhm. Anywhere a lot of water, hear that? Lots of water. Electrical problems, see that a lot. 51,000 home fires are started because of electrical problems. That's a
Yeah.
lot of fires.
So we talked about the big one, which is aluminum wiring. There's a few electrical panels out there which have been notoriously discontinued because they start fires, the Federal Pacific. And
Lenscope
yep, and the stab locks.
and the stab locks, yes.
Yeah, so those ones, anytime we see those, we want to flag those and recommend that they replace the entire box in those. Other kind of things that we see are in older houses where people replace parts with they mix and match brands.
Yeah.
Somebody has a square D box and they buy GE breakers and double tapping where they don't want to add a new circuit, so they'll just add a new wire to a existing, so they have twice as much power coming into the breaker.
Let's see if we can find it.
Those size.
There you go. It's a video.
Panel. This is your most standard type of breaker, will either be a Homeline Square D or an Eaton, and today we are looking at Eatons. There are different.
Anyway, there were two wires come in, and you're not going to see that even if when I'm at an inspection, I always look at the panel and see, number one, what manufacturer is it? And I say, well, that's a Square D, that's a good panel. But when you have an inspection, you're still going to check to make sure there hasn't been some homemade wiring done.
Yeah.
Or that maybe it was not done well, because you can look in some panels and go, wow, that guy really knew what he was doing. they'll make the bends nice and smooth, and if you look in there and it looks like it was built by a computer. Sometimes you look in there and you're like, holy God, what is that mess?
Yeah.
So,
So one thing we didn't talk about before was, ungrounded outlets.
there you go.
So in that 1960 or 1950s house that Liz was talking about, we're probably gonna find ungrounded outlets. And as a home inspector, we're required to call that out.
Mhm.
And then you as agents are gonna have to talk to the clients about how they feel about what was at one time the standard, but now would be considered out of date because it
Out
doesn't
of
have a
date.
it doesn't have a safety feature that.
Right. Not necessarily unsafe, but outdated.
Right.
And if you want, I'll give you Liz's phone number and you can give her a call after class if you want to
Yeah.
just give her a quick note about that. So yeah, electrical, I've been on inspection, or not inspections, I've been showing homes and seeing panels that I didn't recognize. Or thought this looks strange, or man, this deck is right next to the stairway is right next to the electrical panel, you can't even get to the electrical panel. By law, it has to have a certain clearance on the sides and away from it so that you can actually get into it and open it up and turn off breakers if you need to. So, but I've taken pictures of it, sent it to my cousin who's an electrician, and he's called me up typically right away and said, yeah, you got a problem there, or no, these tend to be good panels. This is things they'd look for in an inspection and that kind of thing. So it's nice to have those resources when you're showing if you can, or maybe give Tom a call and say, hey, are you busy? Can you take a look at this real quick, a picture? Sure, he's done that for me.
Yeah, I'm always available. If somebody they come across something during an inspection, you don't know what it is, or you're curious of how that would come out in an inspection report, just text me a picture and, you know, give me the lowdown on what's going on there, and
Perfect.
try to give you an answer on how you can proceed.
Any questions out there? You guys are quiet. All right, safety and security features. While it's nice to have a security system to protect your home, this isn't necessarily what the home inspectors are checking. Instead, they are looking to make sure that the windows and doors have working locks, which is a good thing
Yeah,
if you lock your door.
and so it's incredible a number of houses we find that have key locks to the deadbolt on the inside, which is a hazard. It's also the number of garages that only have the door handle lock and don't have a deadbolt, particularly in older houses. But the one thing I'm going to say here is we are emerged in a new world where there's a lot of internet control devices, including these safety devices, and they can be nearly impossible to be inspected.
Right.
If you are looking at a home and you see that they've got some unique looking devices that you think might be internet controlled, it's great to have a conversation with those sellers about what it is,
How it works.
and make sure that you're crystal clear on whether they consider that to be installed or not. Because that is a contract issue, potential contract issue for you guys.
There you go. HVAC problems. What is HVAC? Heating, ventilation, cooling. Okay. So you're going to do everything you can. Now in the wintertime, what do you do about the air conditioning?
We don't do anything.
You open the window.
So condensers, which is a part of the AC system, which is outside, has a pump in it, and that pump, all the oil is gonna run to the bottom of it. And when it is 65 degrees or lower, which 65 is not that high here, the oil can't get up into the pump fast enough to prevent the pump from burning out. So our clients, the buyers, typically don't own the pump or don't own the air conditioner, so we don't want to run something that we think can damage the system. So we're not going to run the air conditioning system.
They're going to run the furnace, check it, make sure that the temperature is brought up. How many degrees difference does it need?
So we want to we wanna turn it on at least 5 degrees, we wanna see a 15-degree difference.
That's right, 15.
Between the, heat, air supply and the return.
Okay.
So we use a thermal camera, we just go around, our standard practice is just to take a picture of each vent in each room. And then we'll hit those returns just to make sure that there's a high enough differential.
Right. And if you're listing a property, I highly suggest you have the system cleaned and checked before you put it on the market. Because it makes it easy when you go to inspection, you know that you're probably not gonna have any issues with your furnace. Or I have had inspectors say your furnace is filthy and you need it cleaned, and I present them with a form that says this was cleaned and certified and checked 1 week ago. Because some inspectors, not Tom, not good inspectors, but some inspectors are out there to make a quick buck and they're not there to really do much. So it's pretty generic to say your furnace needs clean. Well, I already had it cleaned. I've already sent the paperwork to the buyer's agent. Buyer agent knows that the furnace has been certified. It's in great working condition. So little things like that can help you, because what's nice is if you list a house and you've checked some of the major things, I have a roofer go certify the roof for me. Okay, I pay for that. I want to know that the roofing is good on my listing. I've only had one time where in between the time my roofer checked it and we had the house on the market and the inspection, there was a hailstorm, and the hailstorm came and beat up the roof. The house was vacant. My seller didn't know. My roofer looked on they've got programs that can look up storms. And he said, yep, on this date, there was a hailstorm. And sure enough, went out there and it was beat up. So once in a while that happens and you just don't know. But if you know ahead of time and your people are living there, you got a 99% chance that nothing's going to be bad when he comes to inspect it. Right? And he's going to say, this roof needs certification or it's got some issues and you want to have it looked at. Okay. We'll go pretty fast here for the next few. So we just talked about roofing material and problems. One other thing you're going to hear about sometimes is the gutters are damaged or rotted out, rusted through, whatever. Sometimes you may not notice them. Maybe they look fairly new from underneath, but he gets up there and goes, wow, they're in pretty bad shape. So don't assume that everything is always good if it looks okay. Right? And then we did talk about asbestos. So just be aware, you guys, asbestos is out there. And if you get in, we didn't really talk about it, with old furnaces that look like a monster. They call them what was that?
The octopus.
Yeah, the octopus. They look like an octopus. The old furnaces, they were coal fed. They have vent pipes that come out, and a lot of times they're wrapped with asbestos, and they put a sealer wrap around it. If you disturb that and cut into it, you've now released the asbestos. If you want to continue to use a 100-year-old furnace and it's working, then you don't need to worry about that. But when it breaks down or you replace it, now you're going to have somebody that can mitigate it safely. Radon has become huge now because there's much more awareness about radon. If your people don't have a radon mitigation system when you list it, you may want to tell them, hey, you're probably going to have to, or at least the buyer is going to ask you. And in this market, they're going to always test. And if it fails and has high radon, they're going to ask you to put in radon. Absolutely. Don't have to do it if you want to sell a house that has radon and you disclose it, but it is a problem, and it is something we're detecting almost all the time now, right?
Yeah, so 2 comments. One is active radon systems. The EPA recommends that you test those every 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you change the roof, the windows, or any kind of siding. So I have a lot of customers who call me and want to do an inspection and a sewer scope, and then they say, oh, we're gonna skip the radon, because we saw there was a radon
Mitigation system, yeah.
And then we go in and we see that it was installed in 1994, and we say, well, when was it last checked?
What?
And nobody
Checked?
knows that they
Yeah,
should have,
have it checked out every so often.
and there's also a lot of mitigation systems. One of the reasons we have so much oversight by the government now is because a lot of people were putting in radon systems that didn't meet the standards.
Mhm.
So there may be a system that might not actually be doing its job.
One thing that you're gonna find, that when you're looking at homes, they're supposed to exit I don't wanna play video. The pipe that goes outside, this is where it exits out the house and it goes up. It's supposed to go clear to the top of the roof line. And some people will put it in and they'll put it up about halfway up. And they can get kind of upset because you say, well, it needs to be continued up to the rooftop and exit out the top. And you ask for that and they may say, oh, we're not gonna do that. So you may not, and maybe, I know one time I told my buyer, I'll pay to have somebody come and extend the pipe up another 8 feet. You know, yeah, that cost me a couple $100, but they loved the house. The seller was stubborn, so we got taken care of. You know, don't let something fall apart just because of some minor things, right? Anything else on radon? Nope. Lead paint, we kind of talked about before. Does anybody have any questions on lead paint? Nope. And then certain building code violations. What do you do when you go to do an inspection? Do you look up permits that have been pulled or anything?
So we don't.
Mhm.
So a couple of things here. First of all, standards of practice for a home inspection is not a code inspection. And the reason it's not a code inspection is because the code changes about every 3 years.
Mhm.
And we don't know when any of the work was actually done. We don't know what's original, what's been remodeled, what's been, however, we refer to code a lot. If a buyer asks, like, were permits pulled on this, we do have a software. We charge $20 for a report that will actually pull the reports for you. We think it's a benefit to our realtors because I don't want you wasting your time trying to look through county records to find that. But BuildFax is a list service that we use, and like I said, it's about $20 for a report, and it reports.
And it's pretty easy to go into the county or the city and pull it up and find permits. You can do that yourself. Here's one thing that I would highly recommend. If you're showing a house and it's got a finished basement and you look at public records and it shows that it's unfinished, a lot of times that work was done by the homeowner and never pulled any permits. And so that can be an issue, because what if there's a bathroom down there and there's plumbing and there's electrical? Hope there's electrical so you can plug something in. And they did it themselves and they are not a licensed electrician. You could have some serious issues down there. So, you know, back in the days of the hot market, those things got overlooked. People would say, we're going to go ahead and buy it. We'll take care of things. And they don't take care of things because people move in and go, life happens, and they forget and they don't do those things. Don't let that happen to you. And, you know, just check it out. Call up the listing agent and say, hey, I noticed that the basement photos show that it's finished and yet public records show it's unfinished. Well, let me check. They didn't even ask when they listed the property. The property shows as unfinished in public records, yet it's finished nicely. Did you guys have it finished? Ask questions. Okay.
Yeah, I think the one I worry about today in this market is egress windows.
Yes.
A lot of flippers want to buy a house that has an unfinished basement They add a couple egress windows. They semi-finish the basement, they wanna sell it as the opportunity to create a income producing basement. It's the way a lot of young people are buying houses. When we come out and inspect these, usually it's covered up pretty well, but we have no idea if any engineering went into the cutting of that foundation wall.
Exactly.
And to me, that is a very scary proposition for a buyer,
Mhm.
and all we can do is recommend that you ask
Yeah,
for the information on the permits and the engineering work done. Because any manipulation to a foundation wall is a big deal.
yeah, especially you're looking at a basement like in a fifties home and it's about this big. And now they have these huge windows like this one. That has to be done carefully and made to assured that they haven't affected the structural integrity of that wall. So it could cause massive problems. And you can't just cut concrete out and expect that it's going to hold up to the weight of the house when it wasn't poured with that specification. So this is a perfect example of what an egress window hopefully should look like if it's done right and done correctly for the size of the opening. Now, sometimes the windows are pre-built in the newer homes nowadays. They've been doing that for what? 15, 20 years-ish. So you shouldn't have to worry about those. But if there's one window in the basement and they said, oh, we added an egress window, make sure they have the paperwork and it was done correctly and that you're not going to have a problem with it. Okay. So that takes us to past the top of the hour a little bit. Any questions you guys have on anything we went over today? And I'll take silence. Oh,
Not
there.
all at once.
Do you guys have a picture of like what it looks like to be done incorrectly for the ingress window?
So I'll try to explain to you one that I saw that was done incorrectly.
Perfect.
So they cut the window and put in a wood strips around the outside of it. And when you frame anything, the top, a 2x4, you would always want to be sitting like this.
You would turn the 2x4 so the 4 inches is down.
Right. So because these guys were in such a hurry to put this on the market, they hadn't yet covered the outside of it. And so I could see that header was sitting with the 4 inches, what is this? Horizontally. And I would suspect if it was done correctly, they would have notched into the cement on the sides so that the weight of the 2x4 would have been sitting on the cement, not on the wood. And that's an example of one where, you know, my advice was make sure, you know, there's a risk to this window, make sure that you understand who did it, did they do the engineering work, and was it done correctly?
Because just think of this, if you have a solid concrete wall except for one little window, and now you cut a great big hole in that concrete, you are now putting a tremendous amount of stress on basically what you might call the header part of this window. In a upstairs part of the house, let me just show you a construction picture. Okay, this here is a header. Okay, this is taking the weight of what's above, catching it, distributing it over to the sides where the studs are. Okay, well, if you think of this, if this was concrete and this window started out and it was very small and now you cut the window into this size, it's going to need support up here so that it doesn't come crashing down inside. Okay. That's the best way I know how to explain it. But there are companies out there now that do egress windows professionally. I've had people do it themselves. Probably not the best job. And they didn't hire a structural engineer. So It's not just cutting a hole and putting in a window, right?
Right.
So, and if you go on YouTube or if you Google things, you'll be able to find some pictures, Casey, of things that might help you understand that, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Wish we'd have had more, but I think if she gets this one under contract, I think Liz will, if you want her phone number, I've got it. If you want to just mention that to her or not, it's up to you.
I'll just, if she calls me, I'll just make sure I mention it. But
Yeah,
something we should
right
discuss.
on.
Yeah,
Hopefully she'll get it, which I bet you
Yeah.
she will.
I wouldn't doubt it.
You wouldn't?
I would not doubt it.
Okay.
I mean, it's a crazy.
It's a
It's not the
different,
market where people are fighting over stuff.
nope. It's nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for coming. And I'm doing this, I always do it Saturdays too, but I do it typically from home
Yeah,
because nobody comes in here. But if you wanted to join, I could give you the Zoom and send it to you.
are you doing this Saturday?
Yeah, I do it, supposed to do it the first Wednesday and Saturday of the month.
Yeah, send it to me. I don't know off the top of my head what I have going on Saturday, but
Okay.
if I can join, I will.
That one I do at 9. And I don't always do the same thing, but this worked out well by just opening up questions
Yeah.
from that and getting a lot of interaction. I wish more people would join because we have a lot more new agents than 4,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Well,
well, that's a deep subject.
yeah. Dark. Usually black.
Well, I'm glad, well, I shouldn't say I'm glad, but I'm glad it worked out that when the other one canceled on you, I
Yeah,
got hold of you.
yeah, I
So-
was supposed to go teach a class today,
Aha,
and I don't know what happened, he called me up and just said, hey, we gotta. Something come up, it's not gonna work. So,
cool. Cool,
and I gotta go look at the roof, but couldn't get on Monday.
no, sissy. Yeah.
This is one of those, I think I'm still gonna fly, cause it's, one of those that's got. The 2-story part and,
Yeah,
it's still like a full story from the lower one.
right.
I think I'm getting old, I'm more like to.
No, I'd fly it. I'm not big on rooftops. No,
Yeah,
I don't mind heights if they're safe to get up there or whatever,
right,
but if they're not, 100% no.
well, that's the thing is. I first, a lot of people would take a ladder, carry it up. Put a second ladder up
Mhm.
and. I only do that if it is like. Safe,
Yeah,
like if there's a peak to put the bottom of the ladder on that's flat, but.
no, I get it.
This roof I work with, I always see him like sticking one ladder on a roof that's got a. Like a 6-foot pitch.
Not fun. Nope. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let me know Saturday and I'll send you the link.
Okay,
It's 9 is when I do it,
okay.
so.
Are you selling stuff yet?
Let's see.
Now my signs are in.
What? Yeah. Take care. Hi, girl. What a nice email. Lynn, meet Bob. He is our phenomenal realtor who is super trustworthy and can help you find what works for you. And he won't sell you anything he thinks isn't worth it. We love Bob. He's one of the most awesome people I know. Erica,
Oh.
the people I sold up in
Yeah.
Fort Collins for their son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, crap. I missed
Still,
it. Ah,
I'm gonna leave off of here, so not everybody's looking at your computer.
I know. They can read that one.
Oh,
I
no.
just don't want them to read, hey, that slob, that slime, that. Buckhead, stop there. Okay. Gotta call Preston back a little bit.
Oh,
Let's see, 1:20, 12, I gotta be back home
what
by
time you have to be at the?
1:30, I gotta be home. So. Maybe I'll get my license so I can drive Uber.
Oh, you'd be a fabulous driver.
Yeah, I think I'll go for the senior group.
You don't get to pick what group.
Yeah, I do.
Mhm.
I'll be the luxury old guy.
Say that again. Baby.
It's actually a really cool email that is super on top of everything that comes out when it comes out. It's amazing. So I got an email late last night, I think when the verdict was reached, this is just crazy. You can probably not hear